My name is Glodina Lostanlen. I'm in charge of marketing at Imagine Communications, and it is my pleasure today to present a use case on how to do uncompressed over IP UHD, leveraging the latest and greatest of the SMPTE 2110 standard in a real-life implementation. So I'm going to talk about the project we've been doing with a company in Switzerland, TPC. And so I'm going to start with one thing. And of course, for those who have glasses, you can probably read it. But I was going to say, if there was only one slide that you would have to remember from this talk, that would be it. What we tried to do here is define, okay, what was this customer challenge that we overcome? And so, I'm going to spend much more, most of the time talking about the customer and the solution. And I'm actually using their own slides, not trying to talk too much about Imagine. But here we go. So TPC is a leading broadcaster in Switzerland, and as it often happens as a driver for a move to IP, they have to move to a new location. And so as they have the long-term plan of going to a new location, they wanted to design a new facility leveraging all new technology. And instead of starting with the new location itself, they also had a plan to update one of their mobile truck on the production side. So they decided, why don't we use the truck to test what IP can bring to us and use that as almost like a test box for what will happen in the studio. So I'm going to take you through this, but the point here is that we should remember that one of the key drivers for the move to IP in all the production and playout facilities these days are usually driven by real estate. So I just want to make sure we all know that that's an important factor. So one of the challenges or sort of requirements that they had was that the truck would have to be really AIMS compliant, standard compliant, that it would be IP, that it would do UHD, and just use all open standards, nothing proprietary. So how we helped is we provided a key platform that we've introduced recently called the Selenium Network Processor, and I'll talk to it a little bit about it later, to support uncompressed HD and UHD over IP, leveraging 2110. And then we also provided an EPIC multiviewer and to do signal monitoring, and our Magellan SDNO to do control of all the signals within the truck, within that infrastructure. The benefits of the solution is really to provide a very compact solution and a dense IP-based solution. And of course, in trucks, that has a lot of benefits, as it's always a question about saving space in the truck. So that's important in terms of power consumption and gas and fuel, depending on which country you are. So the other important element in a truck or in the production facility is to have a unified control. So I think the nature of those trucks are still to be a little bit hybrid. You still have SDI going on here, but ultimately you leverage IP to do better control within the truck. So that's also an important feature of the solution. Okay, so let me take you through the slide of the customer who I think wants to really explain here. You have to understand, in Switzerland there are 3 main regions with 3 languages. So there are a lot of requirements of repurposing the same content in different formats, different languages, etc. So I think it's a good example, even though Switzerland is not that big, but if you look at how things happen here in Singapore, for example, it's a good example of having to think about your operations in the most effective way, because you're going to have to reuse the same content in different programs, basically. Different regions, different languages. So TPC is operating all those channels for the SRF in Switzerland, with the main public broadcaster, so it's a public company. This is their new building, as I mentioned earlier. The reason for this project is a nice new building. So that's the way they've organized it or designed it. It's not built yet. With the basement, being the data center, the studio on ground floor, core technology on the first floor, and then editorial for moderation, post-production, and radio on the upper floor. So I think you know, as we share this, I think it's important to see that with the IP design in mind, you can really think about the whole ecosystem of what you're trying to do as a production company. And I think it'll be interesting to share the next level of details on this when they develop it. But it would be, it's a nice blueprint, I think. So their new building has an on-air date of May 2019, so that may seem far away. And they will provide the main technical infrastructure of all of their master switching room, the playout center, ingest transcoding, post-production, studios, etc. So everything will happen in that building. So for them, it's important to make sure that that building is UHD HDR ready, that it's future-proofed, because obviously that's a big investment, and then that because it's a new building, they want to take the greenfield approach and leverage the technology, the best of technology that they can. So these are the sort of high-level requirements that you have for that building. As I mentioned earlier in my, if you forget everything else but one slide, introduction, the design has to be based on open standard, and I think that's a very important requirement. They want UHD HDR uncompressed over IP, because even though UHD might not be used as much today, you've got to prepare to use it in the coming years anyway. It has to leverage SMPTE 2110, and we'll have a slide that summarizes why that is, what are the key areas that are covered by 2110. AES 67 for the audio, NMOS, and you know, some of the things to make the point of the commitment of this company to open standard. They joined AIMS, and they joined SMPTE as well to influence the outcome of the work that we're doing as suppliers together and accelerate the outcome. So I think it's a very good philosophy that they have, and so we're grateful for that. So one of the questions they had before they built that new studio is, how will we get experience before we build a studio from scratch and make some big decisions about which technology, which architecture to implement? So they decided, okay, we can get, you know, some practice on a truck. So what they wanted to gain experience on was the technology, but also the workflows. What are the possibilities with IP that they haven't thought about yet? And they wanted to make sure the interconnection would work fine. And interestingly, for us suppliers, again, is that most customers, they still want a best-of-breed approach, and that's fine. And I think that's why we have to continue to work together, because we have our different strengths, and you know, customers have preferences. So we've got to acknowledge that, and I think they made it clear to all of us suppliers that that's the approach they were going to take. So I think that's very good of them to sort of come up front and say it. Of course, the other item that is very topical is, you know, once you go all IP, is how you make sure you have best practices in terms of IT and security. And I think there's more topics being discussed on this right now. And in AB, I know it was becoming to be an important topic. So I think primarily the practices, the best practice will come out of that experience. So they decided, okay, we have an OB van that we need to replace, so let's replace this one. They call it the UHD1 OB van, so that's the name of the truck there. So it's a pretty large truck, as you can see. You've got the dimensions and all the features there in metrics, and you know. And it has a lot of cameras, 24 HD cameras, 288 audio channels and 5.1, and it does 1080 I-25 frame rate. So a pretty big truck, a lot of equipment going in there. That one is going on air. It's going to be used in December 2017. And the idea is to showcase it at IBC, and then to implement 2160p50, to have it HDR ready, and SMPTE 2110 compliant with the ES 67. So that's how the truck is going to be used. A little bit of information on the best of breed technology that has been chosen so far to be included in the truck. They will leverage the Arista switches for the IP backbone. They will have Sony cameras, as I mentioned earlier, will provide the control for the infrastructure. The overall control system will be a Lavo system. Audio is Stratajack, and the mixer is Sony, and then LSM provides also further control technologies there. And finally, we provide the multi-viewer. So a little bit of, why 2110, what does it bring? And I think, we've done a lot of work on 2022-6, and I think that helped us to learn a lot about how to do IP properly in an uncompressed environment. So with 2110, I think we're solving a few boxes here. It's the timing, the audio, the compressed audio format, the ancillary data, everything is coming together with 2110, and I think it's a question of weeks, maybe a couple of months before it's all signed up, but there's a lot of work that has been done, and again, having customers joining the standards did help a lot. So at a high level, again, that's the architecture, and it's a pretty neat architecture, as you can see, of course, with the IP being in the center, the switches from Arista there. You have all the processing happening on the left, and so and then the multi-viewing on the right, as you can tell. So, and all the cameras feeding into this, and overall control. So when you look at this, I think the IP enables something clean like this. So that's one of the key advantages that we talked about earlier, is how you make this dense and compact and easy to operate and interconnect. So a critical piece of this architecture is the Selenium network processor that I mentioned we just launched, that really is a gateway, an IP to IP gateway, SDI to IP gateway as well, that allows to manage all the signals that are still coming in SDI and convert them into IP, so that most of the routing is all IP there in the truck. So it's very neat architecture there. So as Andreas would present, they've been partnering with us, especially focusing on the product design, frankly, of the Selenium network processor. And what's exciting about this is that it's really leveraging a 100 gigabit infrastructure. It's implementing 2110 fully. So we're really excited to have this used in this use case, but also there are more applications that are coming out of this product. It's a little bit more information about the product itself, but I'm not going to go through the details. At a high level, what it does, it's an IP to IP dense processor for UHD. It drives straight towards ST2110 uncompressed for UHD workflow. And it utilizes fully the 100 gigabit ports, and that's very important to allow the maximum capacity and leveraging the latest in the switching technology, really. It has 4 independent processing blocks, and I think what's important there is to see, you can sort of choose the combination of processing power that you need depending on what are the equipment feeding into that processing architecture. So pretty versatile there in terms of how you use the processing capability. As I mentioned, the main target for these products that is being used in the TPC truck is really high-density frame synchronization and processing for acquisition feeds in an IP world. It's sometimes we call it a gateway, so it depends how we want to use it. But it's for IP facilities. It's really it could be an edge gateway to make sure you can bridge the SDI world to the IP world. And it's also an IP to IP signal processor with uncompressed. And then can do appliance for up, down, cross, UHD, HDR, and more. So with that, I just want to thank you all for your attention. And as I mentioned, Andreas Lettman, the CTO from TPC, always welcome people reaching out to him for either interviews or sharing experience with others to talk about what they're doing there with their uncompressed over IP truck.